So I wanted to talk a little bit about the beginning of World War II in Europe and kind of some of the moves that Hitler made and decisions that he made that kind of made the conflict more or less inevitable. Now, first of all, you have to know Hitler almost certainly did not foresee World War II as it took shape. That is to say, one big European war that eventually became a global war. Rather, he perhaps anticipated a series of short, sharp wars, such as, you know, 2 or 3 wars where he would get the Lebensraum, the living space that he needed. Perhaps he looked back to Bismarck and saw the wars of German unification, which were 3, relatively brief wars that won won a lot for the German Empire, and Hitler perhaps decided to do the same. Now, when he met with his service heads at the Hossbach Conference in November of 1937, I believe, he actually kind of enunciates this. He wants to be ready to fight these wars, and many authors, of course, have commented on the notion that this is kind of what Hitler was looking for. Short, sharp wars that would build the Third Reich he wanted to, that would ultimately achieve autarky for Germany, economic self-sufficiency. Well, kind of the guise that Hitler used to do this, kind of the excuse, the rationale for building the empire for extending the borders of the Third Reich was this pan-Germanism, this notion that Germans, that ethnic Germans, people that spoke German, were ethnically German, should be in Germany. But of course there were ethnic Germans scattered throughout Central and Eastern Europe in lots of different places. So Hitler, we see it happen again and again. He was talking about occupying places where Germans were. Of course he militarizes the Rhineland after it had voted to return to Germany through a vote held by the League of Nations. In March of 1938, Hitler took over Austria. Now, this is significant because at the end of World War I, the Austrians had actually voted to join Germany. Austria, of course, was a German state. It had been the largest German state, and of course, it was the most powerful until it was defeated by Prussia in 1866. And now the Austrians, stripped of their empire, stripped of all of their non-German ethnic minorities and ethnic regions, the Austrians actually voted to join Germany. But at the end of World War I, the Allies did not want to reward Germany in any way with territorial expansion. So they vetoed that. So Austria was not allowed to join Germany. In 1938, then, in March of 1938, when Hitler more or less threatens war to the political leadership of Austria, if they didn't allow German troops just to march in, he does this under the guise of pan-Germanism. These are ethnic Germans. They speak German. They should be part of Germany. And many people in the West, that is to say in Britain, really actually thought that this, Hitler was an honest broker. He was generally looking out for the interests of ethnic Germans, and so they were fine with that. And this, of course, falls into Neville Chamberlain's policies of appeasement. Many people in Britain, not so much in France, but in Britain, really did think that the Treaty of Versailles had gone too far, that Germany had been punished too much, and there was this sense in appeasement of kind of this benevolence. Okay, we will allow you to do that. And the reality was they just weren't prepared to stop them. Now, they may have believed Hitler, I'm sure many of them did, but the reality was they weren't going to stop them, so they had to kind of cover that impotence with this mask of benevolence in Britain. So Hitler goes into Austria in 1938, March of 1938, and this is the Anschluss. Germany and Austria were unified. Almost overnight, Vienna goes from being a Weltstadt, a world city, to being kind of a provincial backwater. Many Austrians were very happy, of course, except for Austria's Jewish population. There were many suicides among Austria's Jewish citizens at the time. But Hitler goes ahead, takes over Austria. People, again, say this is appropriate because these were ethnic Germans. Now, 6 months later, in September of 1938, Hitler applies the same formula. And this time, his target is Czechoslovakia. Specifically, he is looking for the mountain regions known as the Sudetenland. He is saying these are predominantly ethnic Germans. Now, I don't know exactly what the percentage of Germans versus Czechs were in the Sudetenland, but there was a significant number of German speakers, ethnic Germans in this region. Hitler wanted to take over the Sudetenland, as he claimed the German population was being discriminated against, they were being persecuted, and there were some legitimate instances of that. I remember reading, and I don't recall where, of a German professor in a university in Prague who had some problem going to the bathroom, and he'd have to go to the bathroom every few minutes, and his students thought that this professor was kind of making fun of them, so these Czech students literally beat this German professor to death. So things did happen. There were some atrocities that were perpetrated against ethnic Germans. But these were few and far between. And of course, Hitler and his propaganda machine blow these things out of all proportion, and they make it sound like they are the rule, that is what is happening all the time, constantly in the Sudetenland at the time. This, of course, leads to the Munich crisis, the Munich conference in September of 1938. Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Britain, Daladier from France, and Mussolini from Italy, they all come to Munich to meet with Hitler. This was actually the very first time Neville Chamberlain had ever flown in an airplane. They go there and they hammer out a deal where more or less the British and the French tell their Czech ally, you're on your own. We're not going to fight. We're not going to start another world war to protect you people. So the Czechs kind of had no choice, and they surrendered the Sudetenland. Winston Churchill, of course, famously said that it was we've sold our honor so that we could have peace, but in the end we'll have neither peace nor honor, something to that effect. Hitler's strong-arming tactics seem to be working. Okay, he occupies the Czech Sudetenland. Now, this is just the kind of mountainous region around kind of the rump of Czechoslovakia. And critically, that was where all of the Czech defenses were in those mountains. And that was very important. Had the Allies chosen to fight then, Hitler would have been preoccupied taking those defenses, and who knows what would have happened. But then Hitler makes a very important and critical mistake here. And that is in March of 1939, 6 months after the Munich Pact. And the Munich Pact, he clearly stated that the Sudetenland was his last territorial demand in Europe. He was not going to demand any more territory. And that's kind of why the British and the French agreed to selling out their ally, was they thought this will finally calm Hitler down. And again, they either believed or convinced themselves that Hitler was an honest broker. But in March of 1939, kind of without warning, Hitler takes over the rest of Czechoslovakia, the rump of Czechoslovakia. He creates a Slovak puppet state, and then the rest of the Czech regions he turns into a protectorate called Bohemia and Moravia. Now, this is key because the Czechs living there were Slavs. They were not ethnic Germans. Hitler's pan-germanism completely breaks down once you get into Czechoslovakia. And so now anybody that wanted to believe Hitler in Britain and in France, anybody that clung to that idea that Hitler was an honest broker, suddenly realize he is a liar. He is not someone we can do business with. Now, this is going to be very important because not too long after that, just I think about a month or so after that, if I recall, Hitler starts making noises about the return of the Polish corridor. Now, you'll recall at the end of World War I, Germany proper was kind of cut in two. You had, the main bulk of Germany, and then you had the East Prussia area around Königsberg in the east, in what is today northern Poland. But the Poles had a strip of land that actually cut right through those two pieces of Germany, and the German city of Danzig was now a free city under a League of Nations mandate. Hitler is demanding a return of that territory in Danzig to the Reich, and eventually he even makes noises that he would settle for kind of direct road and rail access, which he didn't have. They had to ship things back and forth through the Baltic. And the Poles say this is a complete violation of our sovereignty. We're not giving you the land, and we're not allowing military access through our country. They refuse. Now, this is, again, key, because here, when Hitler was demanding the return of the Polish corridor, he is back on solid ground with his pan-Germanism. He is back to saying, hey, these are ethnic Germans, and again, he's playing this persecution card. And again, I think there were some isolated incidents of atrocities toward Germans, but again, they weren't nearly as pervasive as Hitler made them out to be. But Hitler is saying, look, these are Germans. I want to bring them into the Reich, and the British and the French, they now know better. They know Hitler will not keep his word because he didn't keep his word at Munich, and his pan-Germanism is really just an excuse for territorial aggrandizement. So Hitler, of course, he works out a deal with the Soviets to split Poland down the middle. They do that in August, and on September 1st, 1939, Hitler invades Poland. Now, 2 days later, on September 3rd, 1939, the British and the French both declare war on Germany. Hitler believed they wouldn't do it. He thought they didn't have the stomach for it. He told, I believe it was Joachim von Ribbentrop, he said, I saw them at Munich and they were worms. And then, of course, right after the British and the French declare war on Germany, Hitler supposedly looked to Ribbentrop angrily and said, now what? Because, of course, Ribbentrop had assured Hitler that Britain would never fight over Poland. Anyway, so this is kind of an interesting, I think, way to look at that war and just how Hitler believed he could use this pan-Germanism as a cloak for his territorial ambitions, and how that broke down with his moving into the rump of Czechoslovakia in March of 1939. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please subscribe to this channel. Also, if you like tabletop gaming, including wargaming, check out my other channel, that is The Discriminating Gamer. Please subscribe to that. And please stay tuned for future content. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.